Hello and welcome to episode number 9 of Islington Mill and, a monthly podcast series about the cultural life and times of one of the UK's most beloved artist-led creative hubs, Salford's Islington Mill. One name that has been very closely associated with Islington Mill for over a decade now, I'd say anyway, is that of GNOD, G-N-O-D, the band GNOD, who I'm pretty sure I was aware of GNOD before I even moved to Manchester and discovered Islington Mill, because before that I was still living in Glasgow and I was very involved in the kind of independent promotion DIY noise scene, so I'm pretty sure that GNOD were on my radar. But I do have a cultural memory as well of coming to Manchester and going to see the band Divorce, who I was friends with from Glasgow. I'm not sure if GNOD were supporting them, but they were definitely there in the audience, because I remember one of the lead singers of the band, Paddy, who had kind of dreadlocks in a kind of pineapple thing on the top of his head at the time, being very keen to get the mosh pit started before Divorce had even hit a chord. This was at the Tiger Lounge, which doesn't exist anymore as far as I'm aware. We're talking easily 2010. Yeah, no, definitely 2010. It would have been around the same time that I moved to Manchester. I became aware that my friends in the band Divorce were playing a gig at Tiger Lounge, so I went to see it. And I can't think of the first time I saw GNOD was. I think that probably would have been here at Islington Mill at some point, because practically, I mean, I'm thinking off the top of my head here, but I feel like nearly all the members of GNOD were at some point. Practically all the members of GNOD, not every single one of them, but the majority of them were at some point residents of Islington Mill, either in their studios working here, or some of the members of the band actually lived here, including Paddy, the one of the founder members, along with Chris Haslam, another Chris, who I've never met actually, but Chris Haslam lived here, as did Marlene Ribeiro, who was Paddy's partner at the time. And I'm also thinking about Alex McCart, who I'm pretty sure used to live at the mill at some point. And then there's Alex Wilson, who I don't know if he ever lived in the mill, but he definitely worked here, and he still works here. And I'm sure there are other people whose names I'm forgetting. I think the thing about GNOD is they have had a pretty large cast of floating band members over the years. They work quite collectively, I think, is probably the best way to describe it. But we'll be getting on into all of that as we go into the show. In fact, one of the things I wanted to speak to Paddy about was his time living in Islington Mill, because when he did live here, he was living in this very space that I'm now recording this podcast in, which is Studio 409. Paddy lived here with Marlene at the time. And also, before Paddy was living in this space, Bill Campbell, who is the overall founder of Islington Mill, also used to live in this space. So I wanted to use this time to talk about the band GNOD, definitely, but I also wanted to talk to both Paddy and Bill about their memories of living in this specific space, recording their recollections of what it was like to live here, as we were sitting here chatting shite about living in Studio 409 and working from this space. So that's the general gist of this episode of Islington Mill, and I'm going to cut the crap now and go straight to the interview without any further ado. I'm here in the Studio 409 with Bill Campbell and Paddy Shine of the band GNOD. You are both previous residents of this space, am I right? You've lived here rather than just been working people in this space. And Paddy, you're best known for, how would you describe your role in the band GNOD?
Well, co-founder alongside Chris Haslam and Chris Morley, Del Morley. Myself and Chris Haslam are still in the band. But what's my role within the band? I play guitar, I do a bit of shouting, I write the music along with everybody else. I organise a lot of how we get about, although these days it kind of organises itself, because we've been 16 years, nearly 17 years doing it, so it's kind of it's a thing that looks after itself now, really. It just needs to be guided in the right direction every now and then. And that's my role, really. And it's like an addiction. It's like an addiction.
Can't give it up.
I can't give it up. I've tried.
I
have tried.
Well, you're 16 years deep now.
Yeah, it's like I just can't get away from it, and so I've kind of accepted that I'm gonna be on this GNOD train for possibly forever, and I'm all right with that.
Yeah, cool.
It's okay.
How did GNOD come to be? How did it start?
It was basically born out of frustration with previous bands that we were all in, really. A kind of being stuck in a certain mode of doing things and a certain idea of like what music could be. And myself and Chris, we were in these groups that were very maybe linear in their approach, and we decided we want to go into playing music that was a little bit more out there and experimental, and that's how it came about, really. And then our main goal really was only to release a record, to get a vinyl out there, because 17 years ago to put a record out was still quite a big deal. I'm sure it is now for artists now, for sure, but we kind of thought if we do that, then we can call it a day. That's pretty good. But it's kind of snowballed, really. It's taken on a life of its own, and I mean, it's not to say that we don't put a lot of work into it, but it has sort of it's kind of like one of those things, like right time, right place, right people, and we've somehow found a magic formula that we can still work with each other after all these years, you know, especially me and Chris, because we're the main people who've been in it together for so long. But we seem to have found this magic formula, and it's amazing. It's kind of like been a great way to grow as a musician and as a person, because it's like being married for 17 years.
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
Like it really is. It's like sharing a lot of space and time with somebody and getting to know them, and them seeing all your faults and vice versa, and you know.
How would you describe the sound of GNOD to someone who's never heard them?
Yeah, it's a tough call, that, really. It's a very tough question to answer, because we don't have a specific sound, which is kind of like one of the things we wanted from the beginning, was to not fit into to not be pigeonholed. So these days people might say we were a noise rock band because we've released quite a few noise rock albums, but that would then be not doing justice to the little side releases we've had on the go, which are being a bit more experimental. So I don't know. I guess just a bit of a contrarian group. I kind of like that. Yeah. Contrarian.
Here's maybe an easier way of reframing that question. Like, who are your own personal biggest influences?
Oh, wow.
And why are they your influences?
That's tough, man. That's really tough. I mean, I'll just, instead of thinking about it too much, I'll just go with my gut, like my heart. So I would say, for me, oh God, this is really tough. Obvious ones: Marky Smith, The Fall. You know, there's a group there that are like an institution, and you know, you could never second guess The Fall, really. Oh my God. I mean, the whole Manchester scene, I think for me, as growing up as a kid, I was obsessed with Madchester, you know, and then I came to Manchester really because of that, and because everything I used to read in Melody Maker and Sounds about the Hacienda and about these crazy parties that were happening here, and I was just completely obsessed with it as a kid, and that's why I came here. And now I've come here and I've met a lot of the people that were involved in that scene in one way or another, or partied in it. And I would say that the groups involved with that, and the people I read about, and the parties I read about, and that was probably my biggest influence, really. You know, the kind of Manchester scene and the people of Manchester. And the more that, and now I've lived here and kind of dipped my toes in that and met loads of people, that, yeah, I would safely say that it was and continues to be probably my biggest influence on approaching music, and whatever else, art, whatever, how I dress. You know, I'm obviously just wearing my tracky bees today, and that it's Tuesday, just chilling. But you know, there's like, Manchester's had a huge impact upon me, because as a kid I was obsessed with it, and then I got to live here and meet quite a few of the people I would read about, or go to the places that I read about, to be concise with it, that's what I would say.
Cool. Yeah. Can we rewind a little bit before that, and in case people can't tell from your accent, can you tell us where you're from originally?
Yeah, sure. I grew up in Athlone. This Athlone split between in Ireland. It's split between two counties, Westmeath and Roscommon, and I kind of grew up mostly in the Roscommon side of Athlone town. It's a very small barracks town. It's a small little town. I used to be very negative about the town because I saw it as a bit of a kip, and now that's changed for me over the years because I kind of see the beauty in it now, and I kind of like the fact that it's a little bit behind the times, a little bit unchanged. There's something that I find really nice about that, that is still catching up. Mm-hmm. Still got a lot of catching up to do to where we are now, really, in this city. Yeah. And I kind of really like that. Yeah. But I grew up there, but I also spent a few years in America with my mum. So I was there for 3.5 years in San Francisco as a kid.
Oh, wow.
And that had a big impact on me. And then I left home when I was 17 and moved to Manchester when I was 17. So I've actually been in Manchester longer than I was in Ireland.
Yeah.
Like, easily,
Yeah, yeah.
So it's this feels more like home to me, really.
Yeah, fair enough. And it was music that brought you to Manchester?
Yeah, or? Absolutely. Yeah. I was obsessed with it as a kid from the age. I remember the day my next door neighbour, who was about 4 years older than me, he came back from, I think he went to a Manchester United game or something like that. He came back, he had a pair of red Joe Bloggs on. he had a cassette, and I think it might have been the Stone Roses or the Happy Monday, something like that.
Yeah.
We sat in his dad's car.
Yeah.
His dad had a Seat Ibiza. Yeah. Which was quite flash in those days where I was, and we sat in his car, listened to this cassette, and that was it. I was in. I was like, I need some fucking red jeans.
Yeah.
I need to get some of this cassette, and I need to get a haircut like that. And I'd say I was like, I don't know, 10 maybe. I can't remember what age it was. It would have been 89, 90. So that would have been, I would have been 10, 11. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I remember that period really well as well, because I reckon we were about the same age. If you were like 10.
Yeah.
Yeah. So,
I was born in 79.
Yeah, I was born in 78. So yeah, we're actually like the same age. I was born at the very end of 78 though, so I'm almost 79 myself.
Yeah.
But I do remember like the whole Manchester thing in the media seemed so bright and colourful. And there was something really like... It was a weird thing as well though, because it seemed to only last for a very short period of time before suddenly grunge came out, and it kind of killed all that kind of fun, up, druggy, colourful, smiley face, psychedelic colour, marriage of dance and rock kind of stuff, and all the cultures coming together.
Yeah.
But in that moment when like it was at its peak, like with the Stone Roses and the Happy Mondays and stuff like that, it was super duper influential. But it just seemed like suddenly like grunge came out, and it was like, oh, that's all dead now.
Yeah, it was just,
and stuff. Yeah.
Sincerity took over.
Yeah.
So over sincerity and
over sincerity, because there's a lot of sincerity in the Manchester stuff.
For sure,
as well.
yeah. The attitude of, I remember being young and seeing like interviews with like, God, it could have been anyone. It might have been Tony Wilson, or it could have been just random people on the street in Manchester, just kids, and then seeing like interviews with whatever the young Happy Mondays and that, and just the attitude they have. It was just so cool as a young lad, as a young impressionable lad in Ireland. I was just like, wow, like fucking hell, these are just like normal kids, like scallywags or whatever. Where I'm from, we wouldn't call them scallies, but they were just like normal lads, and they were just cool, and it was like sort of like, I want some of that.
Yeah, I also remember like there being a very kind of, it felt very connected to Ireland as well, because obviously Ireland, a lot of Irish people have moved to Manchester over the years.
Yeah.
It's always been a very Irish friendly city.
Yeah,
but there's a Happy Mondays video, I think it's a video for Kinky Afro, where one of them's wearing an Ireland rugby jersey.
Right, okay.
And that was very visual, like, because I was kind of like, I didn't know who they were. I was like, are they Irish? Like, what's going on with that? Yeah. And then it's like, it's a very kind of, I feel like Manchester's a very easy place for Irish people to relocate to, because it's already very Irish, and there's a lot of that kind of like cultural stuff that is quite specific to Ireland is also kind of embedded here, and stuff. What was like? Did you do when you first came to Manchester? Did you have any kind of pilgrimage thing, or do you remember like the first kind of musical things that you experienced when you got here?
When did you get here?
It was 97.
When did you get here?
Okay. 97. Yes, I went and did all the walking around Manchester to look at the Hacienda, and then I ended up at a couple of free parties at the Hacienda.
Was it still open at that point?
I can't remember. I don't think I went there in 97. It was about 98, 99. I think it closed in 98 or 99, and then there was a bunch of free parties that happened there.
Oh, right, cool.
So I ended up going to those.
Like squat, kind of?
Yeah, just like taking over the space before it got whatever, taken over and pulled apart. And what else? I mean, at the time I came and I managed to blag onto a course called Professional Sound and Video Technology at Salford University, even though I got something like 130 points in my leaving cert, which, if people don't know, the Irish sort of education system is all based on points. It's bullshit. But anyway, so I got 130 points out of 600 at school, and so I couldn't do anything really. I couldn't go to college. But in Salford University, they just said, "Oh yeah, come on over, do this course."
We don't know what that means anyway.
Yeah,
130 points.
Yeah, they were just like, "Well, you're fine, you're grand."
Yeah,
and so I come over, and I was kind of in the midst of kind of like being when analog technology was going out the door and everything was turning digital. And they were teaching us everything about digital technology. Everybody who I went to college with all work for the BBC now, either the BBC or ITV. They've all got fucking really good jobs, like the majority of them, because they were seen as like, right, we got to college and they were like, right guys, you are the guys that are going to be taking over in the next 5 years. Everything's going to be digital, and you're at the sort of, you're going to be the pioneers of this, because you know how to use all this gear. But I didn't care. I just met a bunch of people who were just into smoking weed and listening to music and wanted to get a band together. So we said, let's stay in college so we get our grants. This was still back in the day when you got a grant to go to college. So we'll attend college, we'll get our grants, and we'll just like play music. And then from there I ended up flyering for a bunch of nightclubs, all the usual suspects, the Venue and 42s, and then I ended up working Sankey's, and I can't really remember much of that. I was just partying so hard, really, you know, like it was amazing. I was getting to see a lot of the DJs I'd read about or heard about. They were there. I was bringing them drinks, you know. I was like, had sort of access all areas, even though I was working, but it was like, wow, it was fucking amazing to be in Manchester going to these clubs. And I was still really young. That's when I was about 19, you know.
Yeah. And like a lot of these places don't exist anymore.
Yeah, they're gone. Yeah.
Although you did mention 42s,
that's still there. That'll never go. Yeah.
On Princess Street.
Yeah, no, it's on fucking.
It's off Deansgate, isn't it?
Yeah, it's
it's
on the place on Princess Street. Are you thinking of the Nuts?
No,
where you used to have Poptastic?
There's that, but there was one a bit further down. I can't remember what that one was called. Just over the Whitworth Street. It was part of that Manchester kind of
that was 52nd Street.
Is that 52nd, 42,
yeah.
50?
So I used to fly. I used to flyer for them too. I flyered for all those. Oh God! I mean, I think a lot of people did in Manchester. A lot of musicians in the late 90s, early 2000s were just flyering for all these shit clubs.
I mean, there was a lot of them, wasn't there? There was a lot of these little small clubs around there that you'd find yourself.
That's it. You go out and you'd flyer for an hour, and then you'd like throw them in the bin. And then just go and smoke a load of weed with the rest of the flyers. Have half a pill.
But that must have been quite an interesting time in Manchester, though, because the kind of Manchester stuff,
it was gone.
It was gone.
Yeah, it was gone.
And like I moved to Manchester in 2010, so I've been here for 12 years. And when I moved here, because I also left Ireland around the same time, but I moved to Glasgow. And I did a lot of my musical and club and bands education, all that stuff I did in Glasgow. And when I got to Manchester in 2010, one of the things that struck me was how much of a massive culture industry has built around the kind of wanting to be back in in 1990. You know, the kind of retrospective, like retro, live off the glory years forever. Like, obviously Hacienda was gone, but there's still like Fact 251, whatever it's called, which is still the kind of like... it was the glory days of Tony Wilson and whatever, blah, blah, blah. But, like, what was happening? What was going on in Manchester in around 99, 2000?
There was some great things going on. So, Electric Chair had just not been long started up, and that was an absolute eye opener for me as a young lad going to a party. It absolutely blew my fucking mind. I think so. I went to my first one. It was at the Music Box. I never went to it when it was at the Roadhouse, but I went when it started at the Music Box. And I think I went to an Electric Souls party before I went to an Electric Chair that they had upstairs above Sankey's. What a party, what amazing music, just like beautiful people, beautiful crowd, just kind of a lot like the Mill. When I first started coming to the Mill, you know, it was like that. It was very open, very like non-judgmental, like do your thing vibe. And that was a kind of a new thing for me, because prior to that, I was going to nights like there was a club called Havoc that used to be at the Phoenix. Do you remember the Phoenix on Oxford Road? It's knocked down now. It was a weird place, the Phoenix. It was almost like a mini shopping centre with a club and a bar in it, but it never really took off. It was for students. It was a horrible building.
Was it like near where the BBC used to be?
It was further up the road from the BBC, so it's across the road from the RNCM.
Oh, yeah.
Where the bridge went over.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, it was there.
That's gone.
That's long gone, yeah. But there used to be good club nights in there, so you had Havoc, which was just like acid techno banging, just free party heads going to a club night there. But that was great crack. There was another night, One Tree Island, which was all the Hume lot. So like all the hippies, not really hippies, but yeah, a mixture of like punks and hippies and all that Hume lot would put on a party with that. That was good crack. There's a place called Zumbar. I remember going to that. There was a load of jungle nights. You were kind of spoilt for choice because there was so much happening. Yeah. And like Bill said, there were so many little clubs and little events, and people would be every Thursday, Friday, Saturday night at somewhere like the Roadhouse. You had 3 different nights going on, and you could go out partying all weekend. So you go to Roadhouse but have 3 different kinds of styles of music and 3 different groups of people. And it was great. Especially coming from Athlone, do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's just like, holy shit, I'm in the promised land here.
Yeah.
Like, it's just getting my mind blown.
Yeah. I was very similar when I moved to Glasgow.
I bet,
it was just like all the stuff I read about in magazines and had to daydream about, suddenly could access.
Yeah.
Like I remember going into FOP on Byers Road, and like cassettes were like $2.99 for something that just came out like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. Whereas like in Ireland it'd be like $9.99 at least.
Yeah.
Because they'd import and stuff.
Yeah.
To get a cassette of someone that you already liked. And also just like flyers for stuff.
Yeah.
Like, just seeing like names like Basement Jacks written on a flyer, and it's like what they play here. And it's just mind blowing when you come from a small Irish town where you're only, it's different now, but say like in the 90s and the 80s, the only way we had to access culture was either something on the telly like Rapido or something, which would just show you a video and you're like, I like this, and then maybe the next video would be something shit like Kim Wilde or something like that, or a magazine, which was like it was weird. It's weird thinking about it now because everything is so interconnected and stuff, but the only way you could access culture like that back then was there was only a couple of ways you could do it, and it felt so distant. Like it felt real, like it was out there and it was happening in the real world and real people were doing it. But from my point of view, because I grew up in a town called Dungarvan, which is like similar to Athlone actually, only Dungarvan probably is a bit better off because it's got a tourism industry, which I don't know if Athlone has.
It has a bit, it does, but it's seasonal, let's say.
Yeah. But just that kind of like being able to physically be somewhere and go, it's here, like everything I want, everything I've been thinking about and daydreaming about experiencing. Once I left Ireland, I could actually do it. Like, it's quite, I don't know, it's a really funny thing I think about being Irish and living in the UK is I don't think people in the UK get what the reality of growing up in Ireland is like, because they're so used to Irish people being around, and also we're white so we look similar and stuff. But actually, like, the differences between growing up in a small town in Ireland and growing up in Manchester, massive, to the point where it's really quite hard to articulate it.
Do you think it's still that way now?
I don't know. It's weird because now you've got the internet. So people have a lot easier, quicker access to the cultural stuff, like music and videos and fashion and design and stuff. But at the same time, this is kind of like got to do with my own personal relationship to the internet as well, where I feel like at this point in time, the internet is not necessarily, it's being massively used by capitalism to sell dreams. So I don't know if, like, for instance, kids who are like 15, 16 living in Ireland now, they might be able to access all the different kinds of music that we would have had to wait for the shop to get a tape with one song on a Now album. You're like, I love that Acid House song, but I can only get it on a Now 21 or whatever, and I'll pay $14.99 to get the 2-tape set just for this one song, kind of thing. Kids now can just access anything they want wherever, but that doesn't mean that the reality of the world they're living in corresponds to the stuff that they're consuming, like, for us. And it's interesting that you said that, like, you like how Athlone is a bit behind the times, and it's interesting to know that even though people in Ireland are very internet savvy and everyone's got the net and there's like Irish Twitter and stuff, which is a gas, but still that the reality of living in that country is like a time warp compared to what it's like over here. Like, that's very interesting, and it's interesting that you said that, like, you dig that now. Because for me, growing up, it was like, I need to get the fuck out of here.
The first thing I wanted to do was just get out. I think especially our generation, especially, were like that. I mean, it seems like every generation in Ireland, like, most of the young people leave. But I think at that time as well, like in the 90s, like, we just had to get the hell out of there. And then when we got out, everything went into a massive boom. And I had all my friends ringing me going, fucking get back here, man, I've just crashed. I've just written off 3 cars. I'm going to buy another one. I've bought 2 houses. And it's like, fucking hell, the Celtic Tiger was like, wow, you know.
That was weird, like, that was weird. That was weird seeing Ireland go from this backwater. That was also really quite poor. Like, people don't really recognise how, because I think technically Ireland was classed as a third world country
at that point,
up until like the 50s and the 60s, because that's how much money people were living on. And then it started to, after the Second World War, you had the generational thing of kids leaving, coming to England, earning money and bringing it back, and that's when things started to change in Ireland. But like, up until the Celtic Tiger, like, it still felt so backwards, like, and even so it was weird not being there and seeing the Celtic Tiger happen, but then also seeing what happened, like, in 2008 and 2010 and stuff, and also what's happening now. Watching it from a distance, like
the housing crisis.
The housing crisis. I mean, has that had any impact on you? This is something that, like, I hear about all the time from the media, the Irish media that I still consume. But I'm obviously not living in Ireland, and, like, don't know anybody yet of my, like, relations who are maybe, they will be in a few years, I think, come to the age of looking to buy a house, but they're not ready for that yet, so it's not a reality for them yet, I don't think. So, like, it's really still quite abstract for me, because it's just like, what the fuck is going on over there with housing? Like,
it's not had a huge impact on me personally. I mean, because I move about a lot, and I would never really want to buy a house anyway. I mean, I do have a house, but it's in Portugal. That cost me fucking peanuts because it's in the mountains and nobody wants to live there. But I mean, in Ireland, no. But I have family in Ireland who. Family members all across the board, cousins and all that, who are in their 20s and 30s, and they're living at home with their parents because they cannot afford to buy a place or even rent a place. And even if they could, there's nowhere to rent or to buy anyway. And yes.
And do you mean in Athlone as well? Like?
I mean Athlone, all over the shop.
And
like, to live in Athlone, for some people to rent a shitty little 1 or 2 bedroom flat in Athlone would be like €1,400 or something.
Wow.
Do you know what I mean? For like a shitty little flat that it's a dunghole really, and you wouldn't want to pay that money. So, but they're all full anyway. People live in them because there's fuck all. So there is this sort of weird. There's a lot of young people in Ireland now that might be, what's the word, infantilized, you know, who kind of like stuck in this, not really breaking away from the family. The only way they could do would be move to Australia, move to the States, or move to the UK. But because there's good jobs in Ireland now, which there wasn't maybe previously, what with all the tech firms there and the huge investment from American pharmaceutical companies and people like... who were the big vaccine companies? What was the big one called?
Pfizer?
No, what was the other one? No, AstraZeneca. So they have, I think they, like in Athlone, AstraZeneca have a fucking huge factory.
Oh, right, okay.
Huge factory, and they employ a lot of people from the town and pay big money for people to work there. Yeah. But there's nowhere for these young people who work in these jobs to live.
So employment isn't a problem because people are working for AstraZeneca.
There's loads of work.
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah.
And then I guess that's how people can afford to pay €1,400 for a shithole. Because they've got a decent job.
Yeah.
Right. Okay, that's interesting.
And Athlone is also the kind of place where people go to raise a family. Yeah. It's nice, quiet, boring, very conservative.
Yeah.
Great place to raise a family. But, you know, the infrastructure isn't there. Like, when I first moved back there 5 years ago and I was trying to get a fucking dentist or something, I can't remember, something like that. And it says you have to go on the waiting list. And I was like, oh, okay. Right, and then I got chatting to the receptionist. She was sound, and she was saying, I was saying, so what's going on? And she said, well, we've just got so many people moving into the town, from all over Europe, and we just haven't got. We've got loads of people coming in, but we haven't got the infrastructure to deal with that. Like you can see it here with like us having these huge waiting lists for people. The schools, you know, there's not enough schools to deal with all the kids.
Yeah.
And the direct provision situation. It's just like Ireland was just the politicians just really didn't realise that they were going to have to really improve the infrastructure of the country. You know, they were too busy making a buck. You know,
yeah.
As most politicians are, it seems. Yeah. So, I mean, it's a funny old spot, Ireland. It could get it right if it went down the route of like the Scandinavian countries. It could fucking do really. It could be a great place. I mean, I think it's a great place anyway. To be honest, I mean, I don't really have many hang-ups about it anymore. I used to really be down on it, but I actually think it's a great spot. And I think it could be an even better spot if the right crowd were in charge. But you could say that about anywhere, couldn't you?
Anywhere.
Yeah. So,
well, talking about living. And living in a place. Yeah. We've got another guest with us today, Bill Campbell, who's been on this show loads of times, so I don't really need to introduce you, Bill. Okay. How did you first meet Paddy? How did you guys get to know each other?
I remember the very first time.
Oh, yeah, go on.
I don't know if Bill does.
Why would that be?
No, it was gas, because we came to a party, there was a bunch of us. It would have been me, Chris, and a bunch of the North Manchester people. And I think it might have been your sister's birthday party.
My sister's birthday
I think
party?
so, yeah.
Okay.
But I'm going back now a fucking really long time. I can't even remember, but it's a long time before any of the floors were ready to go. So you just had the ground floor. And there was a little party going on, and I don't know how we ended up getting onto it, but you let us in anyway, and we were having a really nice time down there, partying. And then we ended up somewhere up on the floors, because I don't know how that happened, but we did. And then we were all ended up sitting around drumming with all this building material that was around. And we were drumming and making noise and jamming like idiots. And then you like appeared out of nowhere and you were like, oh, is everybody okay here? Are you guys all right? And we were like, yeah. And then you were like, okay, right, just be careful. And then you left. And that's the first time I remember. That was the first time I remember meeting you. But that was like, and then it was years after that, like quite a few years, maybe like 4 or 5 years, possibly, I don't know, 3 to 5 years after that, where we met properly, I think.
Because I was going to say I met you when you were doing a gig here.
That's right.
And you came and sound checked in the afternoon, and I was building the picnic benches outside.
That's right.
That's when we had a chat.
Yeah.
But maybe you played here before with.
I played with the Stranger Sun here before, with the fire engines.
Fire engines.
Yeah.
That's
when the stage was at this side of the building.
Yeah. So that was one of the first like gigs rather than a Club Brenda gig that we did.
Yeah.
Freezing that night.
It was, yeah.
No heating.
It was good though.
Yeah.
It was really good. It was a great night. Yeah.
That's like.
But we didn't meet then. We didn't meet then. No. It was at the Acid Mothers show.
Oh, was that a Golden Lab? I wondered if it was Nick Mitchell's Golden Lab.
It wasn't. You know what it was? It was an all-dayer with Serena and what was Serena and Thingy's night called? Something Wolf? No. Do you remember Serena?
Serena or Selena?
Oh, maybe it was Selena, blonde-haired lady.
I remember a Selena. I know a Selena with blonde hair. Yeah,
it must be that. It was like DJs, and she was a promoter.
Yeah,
and her and I can't remember the name. Fucking hell, really bad with names. Lovely people anyway. It was one of their gigs. I think it was an all-dayer.
Okay. I remember it being during the day, like just a Saturday afternoon or whatever,
Yeah.
and I was just popping about in the courtyard
Yeah.
doing some stuff, and then you guys were all hanging out and ended up having a chat with you.
Yeah, and then we had like a bit of a do that night, didn't we? A bit of a party.
Yeah.
And then I think then from there, I think you then just said to us, well, I can't remember what happened, if it was that night we were said, yeah, we're looking for a rehearsal space, and you said, oh, check this space out, and you brought us into the back room behind the venue, behind the stage.
Oh, okay, so that'd been a recording studio.
That's right. And you said, this is going if you want it. And we said, yes, please. And then we moved in there and started rehearsing, and we were like here, because in those days we would rehearse 3 or 4 days a week, or nights a week, so we were here, we were around a lot.
I'd forgotten you was in there.
Yeah, so we were around a lot.
When was that then?
God, I don't know, it must have been 2010.
Okay.
Must have been 2010. End of 2009, 2010.
Because you've been well, you said 16 years before, so you would have been going 4 years by then?
Yeah, we were 2006, actually. 2006 when we first started jamming as GNOD. So what's that now? How many years?
16.
16 years.
Yeah.
So, yeah, and that's when we first met, and yeah, I can't remember. Because at that point, after that, the gigs were happening, but then it went quiet for a bit, didn't it? There was a bit of a refurb going on.
Oh, okay.
There was
we put the ramp in and the new door.
That's right.
Maybe.
So there was a bunch of gigs happening, and then it went quiet, and there was all that, and that was almost like the quiet before the storm, really, wasn't it? That's how I see it.
It depends which storm.
Well, I know there's been a few, but for sort of like my time at the mill, I think the period after that, up until like 5 years ago, 5 or 6 years ago, that was when it, like, the mill was just crazy. It was like there was something on every night, or there was something going on, like every day, every night, and it was just like really full on, amazingly full on, you know.
Because for me, that's like the midway point, because we'd started doing stuff in 2004, 5, so we'd already had like 5 years of
doing
that mayhem, and that was really, well, it's Fire Engines gig was around that time, 2005, 6.
And there was an Acid Mothers gig too that we all came to when the stage was there. I remember being.
And Sounds from the Other City had been going a good few years by then, so we'd got into a bit of a rhythm by that point.
Yeah, and we used to always get into the parties, the after party for Sounds here at the mill, so we were always at that as well.
It sounds like, from my knowledge of the mill timeline, that kind of like post 2010, the kind of off their heads era, when Riv was here booking stuff.
Riv was booking stuff,
so it was a bit more formalised in terms of we're actually working with promoters and agents and stuff like that, possibly.
Yeah, we were doing our own bookings, whereas prior to that, it was, well, people like Nick Mitchell bringing stuff here.
Yeah.
You know, there was a handful of promoters like Selena invest in property, and Tramp and people like that, who were doing kind of band club nights, and they'd bring stuff here, but we didn't do many, if any, bookings ourselves up until Riv. So maybe it's that bit when we started doing like more stuff every few nights rather than every couple of weeks.
That's the bit where I really remember. Yeah, because the refurb happened, the new bar got put in, there was the ramp, blah blah blah, and then it was like boom, doors are open, fucking let's go. Yeah. And I think it was around that point, I can't remember when we moved into this space.
That's the next question to ask about, because we're currently sat in Studio 409. And I've already covered with you, Bill, how you came to live here. It was the first place within the mill that you came to live here. Paddy, how did you come to live in here?
Well, I needed somewhere to live. Myself and Marlene needed somewhere to live together, and I can't remember. I mentioned it to Bill, and Bill was like, "Oh, I know a place. The only thing you've got to do to get it is to move the fridge of doom, out of there."
What was the fridge of doom?
It was just a fridge that I got left in here, and
with stuff in it.
At one point, it had a freezer full of high quality meats and seafood. But obviously, there'd been a few power cuts or something over the years, and maybe the fuse went on the fridge, and the fridge got forgotten about because it was in a corner, and these things happen.
What Maury, my husband, also from Ireland, grew up on a farm, had always said, as soon as that happened, "Oh, don't worry, I'll take care of that." Yeah. I'm used to the stink of rotting animals. Only he didn't quite get around to it that weekend or that month or that year.
Yeah. So me and James, we did it, and we had to like gaffer tape it together, seal it. It still leaked out. It was horrendous, but we got the fridge out, and then we came in and we got the space, and we put these walls in. Really, really funny those walls, aren't they? But they work. And
we're pointing at like plasterboard walls. How would you describe them?
Yeah,
not meeting at the top.
Yeah, that was part of the design, you know.
Yeah, that was the design.
It's a kind of a New York sort of like Brooklyn Bridge sort of thing going on there.
Yeah.
Bit of air conditioning.
Yeah.
Has this space changed much since you lived here?
Well, not really. I mean, obviously you've knocked this wall out here to make this room bigger, because this used to be 2 rooms, and there's a lot more stuff in there. I mean, when we were living here, we had all of our shit in there. That's the only difference, really. And the fire for us, the wood burning stove for us, was like the epicenter of the whole place. Yeah. And that seems to be kind of forgotten about now, which I think is a real shame, because the fire was amazing. And we used to, and you have that big table out there that you used to use for cutting material or doing stuff on, and that was like our kind of dinner table, so we could fit 12 to 15 people around that table, and it was amazing. So we had loads. The best thing about it actually was having loads of dinners there with artists who were in residence, or just the people that were here in the studios on all the floors. We'd all sit around there quite a lot, 2 or 3 nights a week, be a big dinner together, and I think that's where a lot of really good friendships were made, relationships, ideas for projects. That all happened around that table. I had some of the best nights ever, just sat around that table talking shit. And it was like the great thing about this sort of flat as well, this space, was we were kind of the only people that had an oven, and there was quite a few people sort of staying here or spending a couple of nights at their studios at one point, working. They were working really hard. And so they, I'd come out in the morning or whatever, and somebody would just be like whacking a pizza in the oven, like, "Oh, all right," and I'd be like, "Oh, all right." And it was like that. It was a very shared sort of situation.
So even though it was like your flat, it was still there was a communal aspect to
Absolutely,
it.
Yeah. And I really enjoyed that, actually. I mean, obviously didn't maybe not enjoy it all the time when you'd come out and somebody'd be like on your sofa, and you're like,
who are you?
Yeah. But there was something really nice about that as well, because when I would go away and tour with the band or whatever, I'd just leave the door unlocked and open, and you knew that I'd come back and everything was always absolutely fine.
Yeah.
And
was that also because you took all your most valuable possessions on tour with you?
No, okay. definitely not.
Yeah.
But it was just, it was a very, it was a very open, very fruitful time. I mean, and also I had some. Personally, in this space, I had some of the biggest life-changing moments. Well, God, that sounds so dramatic, but I had a few epiphanies and revelations in regards to how I was going to live my life, or how I would like to live my life, and sort of coming to terms with getting, you know, like I remember a point where I was living here and I was like, right, that's it. I'm fucking like, I'm going to start running and I'm going to like be really fit and healthy. And I had gone and done that Wim Hof thing in 2014 or whatever. And I decided after the Wim Hof thing, like that was it. No more fucking staying up till like from Friday till Sunday. I'm going to be, and that was all happening here. And that was at the peak time of when the party shit was happening here. And it was a really good lesson for me in like sort of dealing with my own sort of shit in regards to coming to terms with not wanting to party so much anymore, and like learning to kind of chill out, and then being with all these really nice supportive people who would take the piss out of me and like look after me at the same time. And yeah, it was really good. It was I learned a lot.
Yeah,
being in this space.
I definitely feel that. Yeah, I totally empathise with that. There's something about this space that, like, I don't know how to articulate it, like, helps you refine yourself. I don't know. That maybe that seems like quite a clinical way of. But I don't know.
That's your experience of it now as well, is it? So,
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like, basically, my history with this space was. Over the course of lockdown, it was the summer, I think, or towards the end of the summer of lockdown, I had quit my job and I was looking for other forms of things to do, other forms of income to bring in. And I'd been talking to people about wanting to start a podcast. And you overheard me and you approached me saying that, like, you would like to be interviewed for a podcast, which we did, which was for the first podcast that I did, which was called Body Talk, and it was about queer stuff. And then off the back of that, I then went and did a quite long set of interviews with you over the space of a few days about your recovery process, which are like private interviews. They haven't been published publicly. And we did them in here. And at the end of that process, you said to me, I don't use the space anymore. Do you need access to a space? And I was like, fuck yeah. And off the back of that, I knew then that stuff like Laurie, who also uses this music studio, was looking for a place to come and rehearse, and me and Laurie could work together. So I asked Laurie to come in, and me and Laurie kind of came into the space and like started bringing other of our friends, our musical friends in, and like populating it with stuff. And I was able to use this space to produce stuff that became my income. And what that allowed me to do was, because up to the point of I was working as a carer at that, before I quit my job before that I was working as a carer, and like, holy shit, working as a carer under lockdown was like, under the pandemic, next level stress, and it just kind of, you know, we've all got our own lockdown stories. But for me personally, working as a carer and having to go out day after day in the whole era of when they were calling people quote unquote heroes, frontline quote unquote heroes, what that meant to me was your life is disposable. We don't care if you live or die, and if you do die, you'll get a round of applause, but are we going to give you a better wage? Are we? Fuck. So it really came to a head here. So I had to kind of quit everything, and I was living off a bit of money that I'd saved up, but through working in here I was able to create and produce stuff that was able to bring in more like a living. I was able to make a living off it. And it allowed me to refocus what I wanted to do and kind of get away from the capitalistic system of the labour of your body, especially under lockdown when I felt like my body was in real danger because I was having to go on the bus every day and people were coughing and stuff. And like, this is before we knew the reality of, but we were still under all that anxiety. So being able to like cut all that out of my life, come here to this space, be able to focus on what it was that I wanted to do and what I wanted to create, and then having the space and the freedom and the people around me who were able to, I was able to turn that into an alternative income stream for myself. And then since that, it's just built up. And like, because I mentioned before that like I left Ireland and I moved to Glasgow, and Glasgow was like, from talking to you, I know that you did a lot of your kind of post-Ireland growing up in Manchester. I did so much of that in Glasgow. I used to have a music studio in Glasgow very, very similar to this, but it ended very badly. There was an arson attack and someone tried to burn the building down. And I was the last person to leave the building that night, and my close friend who had a studio downstairs, I was literally on the bus on the way home, she rang me up and she said, "Are you still at the chateau?" And I was, like, no, why? And she was like, it's on fire.
Oh my God.
And I was just like, I didn't exactly wet myself, but it was very, very close because I literally just left that place 15 minutes ago. What the fuck?
Wow.
So I've carried around a lot of baggage and trauma about that happening to me, which I've been able to work out here by bringing all my music equipment in here instead and setting it up again.
Yeah.
And I feel like I've been given a second crack at the whip in terms of like setting up a music studio and being able to actually get my musical friends to come and collaborate and like, let's do this again. And the fact that this space has given that to me is incredible.
Yeah.
Like, I'm always going to be so grateful for that. Like, it's literally changed my life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, changed my life not in terms of seeded something in me. Changed my life in terms of that seed was already there, but this is the place where that seed was able to grow.
Yeah, I would say the same. I'd say the same for me and for Nod, because I was living here, Chris was downstairs, me and Marlene were living here, so there's 3 Nod people here, and it was living in this place where we formulated, you know, we did a lot, where Nod did most of the groundwork for itself in the period that we were here at the mill, from rehearsing, from meeting so many people, being able to go to so many gigs, be kind of almost like the in-house band in a lot of ways. We could use the venue space to record and rehearse in. It's where we first got the Nod rig together, where we put our own sound system together and we could test run it in that space with our sound engineer, who was the in-house engineer for the mill. You know, it was, and he was also living here as well, wasn't he? Rakes was living here.
Oh God, yeah.
And then it was a place where I developed Tesla Tapes, my record label, where Marlene recorded her first album as Negro Branca, which to me is still one of the best things to come out of the mill, musically speaking. I think it's a phenomenal piece of work. And that all happened here in this space, really. So God, yeah, the amount of stuff really that happened here, and the amount of people we got to meet and host, and when the parties or the gigs were happening, sit up here with somebody, sit around the fire with somebody who'd just done a gig downstairs, and they might just want a quiet space to sit and have a cup of tea for half an hour, and they could come up here and we'd sit and just like sit around the fire.
Yeah.
And that would blow their minds as well, because they were like, fucking hell, no way is this here, you know. It was like so yeah, it was fucking, we were very lucky, we were very grateful actually, Bill. Yeah, I'm sure I have thanked you, but I'm going to thank you again. You know,
on record,
so much, man.
On record.
Yeah,
both very well.
You're so generous, like with this, you know, and this space, obviously the space has got a bit of magic to it for sure. Then,
definitely.
And what was it like that for you when you were here?
A space of excitement, potential. Yeah, because it was the first space that I was occupying. So, you know, for me, it was like literally coming into a derelict warehouse. And very quickly it became, wow, what can we do with this? Imagine, because we were just running around the whole mill on our own. There was nobody else here then. Yeah. So this is, for me, I think of it as my kind of spiritual home in this place, because this is where all the seeds of what the whole mill could become was hatched around a table. Maybe not that one. A few drinks.
But that is still the same big. That is the same pattern curtain table, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's the same table.
Yeah.
So how many years has that table been here?
Well, 20.
20? There you go. It's the same table.
23, 20.
Yeah. Maybe it's the table that has the magic in it.
Yeah.
It's that piece of sheet of
a lot of plans get hatched around that table. I mean, I think the table has got the magic, because it's like the space. The space is very important, but then the big table is very inviting, because it's like, what are we going to do around this table? You can either work on it or sit around, eat, chat, fucking come up with ideas, skin up, come up with a plan, forget all about it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
All in 5 minutes.
All in 20 years and 5 minutes. Right, I'm going to end it here because it's a really beautiful place to end it. So thank you both, Paddy Shine and Bill Campbell, for this interview about
thank you, Niall.
The history of NOD and Studio 409, and
Lovely.
let's hope it's a good future too.
Yeah,
thank you guys.
Thank you, man. Nice one.
And there you have it. All there's left for me to do now is to firstly apologise for some of those very rough edits at the start of the show. I completely forgot I was talking about the Ruby Lounge when what I meant was the Tiger Lounge. Those are two different venues in Manchester. The Tiger Lounge is gone and I think the Ruby Lounge is still there, but I'm not 100% sure. But anyway, that's why it sounded a bit weird when I was talking about the Tiger Lounge. And the second thing for me to do to say adieu for this episode of Islington Mill is to play you out with some GNOD. This is taken from the album Infinity Machines, which was released on Rocket Recordings in 2015. You can get it on Bandcamp. Remember to spell GNOD, GNOD. Bandcamp, I'm sure you can work that stuff out. And this is Breaking the Hex. Till next time.